Hi, welcome to my talk on making unfamiliar C++ code familiar with GitHub Copilot. My name is Sina McKinjit, and I'm a product manager working on the GitHub Copilot experience for C++ developers, and we have a lot of exciting new updates to our tooling to present today, designed to help you even more with your C++ code. Today, we'll explore some of the latest capabilities for Copilot. First, we'll set some context into what Copilot is and what it can do for you. Then we'll get into some of the latest advancements made specifically for C++. Following that, we'll showcase a demo of how the latest version of Copilot can assist in understanding and navigating code bases efficiently using real C++ code. After the demo, we'll review the different Copilot IDE integrations designed to meet you wherever you are, whether you're just getting started, debugging, or improving code for the future. Finally, we'll talk about all the ways you can customize Copilot to tailor it to your needs and preferences. So let's quickly refresh on what GitHub Copilot is and how it can help you with your coding as a tool. GitHub Copilot is an AI-powered pair programmer that is designed to help you write code faster. It is integrated deeply into Visual Studio and VS Code to provide dynamic coding suggestions, cater to your workflows, and can support any repo type, Git or non-Git. For example, it continuously analyzes your code to provide inline autocomplete style suggestions as you write code in your editor. There's also a chat interface that's integrated into Visual Studio and VS Code that allows you to interact with your code using natural language and ask some fundamental coding questions or questions about your code too. In the chat panel, you can also utilize different dynamic context for custom suggestions, including manually invoked context such as #include open files and @workspace to index your entire repo, but it can also automatically detect context from your natural language prompts, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. So this past year, we've been really busy. Since we last spoke at Pure Virtual Conference last year, we've listened to your feedback and focused on improving the tooling for Copilot for C++ developers. So as we all know, C++ can be a complicated language with language compliance, build systems, and several other factors at play at a given time when you are writing C++. Our goal is to ensure that Copilot provides the more relevant, accurate suggestions for C++ for your needs. And so we've invested in two key areas to improve the contextual awareness of Copilot in C++ projects, including increased awareness of C++ project structures and smarter context in chat, so that you don't need to think about all your project configurations when leveraging Copilot and can just focus on reviewing responses generated by AI and iterating. So we'll touch a lot on this new updates to context in the demo today. GitHub Copilot is also even more deeply integrated into Visual Studio and VS Code at several different points in the C++ developer loop to provide AI-powered assistance wherever you are, whether that be just starting out with understanding your C++ code base, your programming task at hand, and learning about different concepts involved with your programming tasks, to actually implementing those lines of code that are associated with your latest feature or your bug fix, and then debugging and testing your solution to ensure that it's compliant with your requirements and bug-free through making future improvements to the code base, such as refactoring your C++ code to optimize for memory performance or improving code readability and documentation for your coworkers. So let's take a look at several of these improvements to Copilot that we discussed in action today in Visual Studio using real C++ code. Okay, so here I have Visual Studio 17.14 Preview 3 installed, and I have the Pioneer Space game repo. And what Pioneer is it's a space simulation game that's written in C++, and I've been given the task of implementing a new orbital function for velocity and energy. And so, as you can see, this is a pretty large repo. There's several things going on, such as a lot of external dependencies in the contra folder. The source folder has several different dependencies, such as like graphics rendering, and the test suite and text rendering, and lots of core functionality in .cpp files as well, and header files. And so to locate my relevant code that I would need to make updates in, I can actually utilize Copilot to help me with locating my specific code rather than having to navigate through all of this code to understand where exactly I need to implement my fixes. And so I can ask Copilot chat in the Copilot chat pane, where in the project is the velocity of the orbit function handled, and energy of the orbit function. And as you can see, it also underlined specific context. So it's going to actually invoke relevant tooling rather than me having to invoke the relevant functions and context via pound or at workspace. And so this is where Copilot has really improved some of the context to be smarter so that it can detect based on your natural language what exactly it needs to invoke to answer your question. And so you can see there's several different references and tasks done to help me get to my relevant code. And so it's telling me that the velocity and energy of the orbit function are in this orbit.cpp file, and there's several different functions that are defined but not implemented. So that looks like exactly where I need to start. So we can navigate over to the orbit.cpp file by just pressing click. And this is super helpful that it's integrated fully into this IDE, so I don't need to search around, and it can get me straight to my functions that I want to implement. So I see that there's several different to-dos for different functions here. And so let's zoom in a little bit. I see that there's this function for calculating velocity area and calculating the orbital area. And so I want to get my bearings a little bit in this code base, and I'm understanding that there's these different parameters and they all make a little bit sense to me, but I don't quite understand what eccentricity means. Copilot is now actually integrated into the quick info dialog so that it can help you describe any C++ symbols using relevant context and the LLM, so that if your symbols are lacking descriptions or functionalities or documentation, it's able to help me with understanding what this exact symbol does. So it's telling me the symbol eccentricity typically refers to a measure of how much an orbit deviates from being circular, often used in the context of conic sections or celestial mechanics. So that sort of helps me understand what this specific parameter means. And so I can sort of understand a little bit more about my specific parameters and what I need to implement. And so I've gotten my bearings a little bit, and now I want to actually implement my lines of code. If I go to Tools Options, I can actually see that the Copilot completions model has been updated to GPT-4o Copilot. And what GPT-4o Copilot is it's a fresh update to the base completions model, where it's been based on GPT-4o Mini, and it has been trained additionally on over 275,000 high-quality public repositories on over 30 popular languages, including C++. So this is a lot more representative and has a lot more training data that is representative of C++ and C++ code. So we're constantly making updates to the GPT-4o Copilot model, but really exciting to see that this has made its way into the product. And so I will have more accurate C++ suggestions based on this new model. And so I can go to my function and I can start typing my suggestions, and you'll see that completions pops up in line to provide me with inline style suggestions. And so it tells me what it thinks I'm trying to do, and it all looks good here. And it even makes the adjustment that I would want the orbital body or orbital period rather than the orbital period to body function based on my parameters, which makes a lot of sense. I can also navigate down to my calculate orbital energy function, and I can invoke Copilot to sort of help me with suggestions here. And so it provides me with really helpful comments and generations, and it even tells me where the source of the function that it is referencing comes from. And so this is super helpful for me when I'm trying to understand a little bit more about the functions that I'm trying to generate and ensure that it is up to the standard so I can review that in the future. But for now, this function looks good to me. And so I'll save this all And I'm now noticing between these two velocity functions that there's a little bit of duplicated code. And so I'd like to refactor for the future for this to be pulled out into its own helper function that these functions can call on. And so to do so, I can actually navigate back over to the Copilot chat pane and open a new edits thread. And so in this edits thread, I can ask, can you pull out any duplicated functionality that is repeated between the velocity functions, its own helper function within orbit.cpp? And what Copilot Edits can do is it can provide me with an edits focused session and tell me the plan and what exactly it's doing. And so it's not necessarily just a chat interface, but it's deeply integrated into the editor to provide me with, as you can see, some inline style suggestions, which I can accept and review line by line to make sure that it is everything that I would want to achieve with this. And you can sort of iterate with this to add new functionality to your programming, and etc. And so what Copilot Edits does is it actually uses a speculative decoding endpoint that is optimized for fast applications of changes in file. But our team also knows that this can be faster and can be improved. So stay tuned for performance updates here as well. And so I see that it provided me with my new helper function. I can tap to accept that. I can accept these changes so that it invokes my helper function. And then I don't need the rest of these edits because it's not necessarily relevant, even though it's suggesting me to clean up some white space. So it all looks good. And now my code is refactored so that the duplicated functionality is pulled out into its own helper function. To improve readability for the future, I also want to document these functions since there's still a to-do and it's sort of like a vague sentence about a helper function. And so I can delete this sentence and I can type / in my case because I have XML.comments configured for this project. And it'll provide me with suggestions for the function summary and parameter names based on the usage of these functions and parameters. So really helpful with generating good descriptions for C++ and improving it for the future so that other people understand what's going on here. And so that all looks good to me. And I can navigate up and do it to my other new helper function so that it's a little bit more specific. And so it tells me it'll do this velocity value function and the specific parameter names and returns. So everything looks good here. And so now that I have sort of implemented this functionality and documented it and refactored it to be better, I'd actually like to learn a little bit more about refactoring this function below. As I can see, there's a few different for loops, and I was curious if I can refactor this to use algorithms in this specific scenario. I'm not going to implement it right now, but I'd like to explore that so that I can improve it for the future. So I can go back over to the chat pane using create new thread, and I can ask it, how could I refactor the loop code in calc position from mean anomaly? And I can manually invoke that because I want it really to be constrained to that function rather than dynamically detecting intent to use algorithms. And Copilot Chat can look at my C++ project context and provide me with suggestions. So it's telling me I could use std generate or std findif to update my loop. So it's telling me even my code suggestions so I can review that all. And it provides me with really simple key changes that it's provided me with and the benefits of refactoring. And so this can be really helpful for like end-to-end refactoring solutions as well. And so I actually was curious, based on this response, I've heard good things about std ranges, and I'm curious if I can implement that for this function. And so I'm curious, can I use std ranges instead? And Copilot can actually, again, look at my C++ project context and tell me that I do not have std ranges compatibility because I am using C++ 17. And so it sort of tells me some suggestions here that I would need to update my project to C++20. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about modernizing this repo to be updated to that standard. And so I can actually switch over the model to Claude 3.7 Sonnet, which I've heard has been better with multi-file refactorings and understanding architectural planning. And so maybe this can provide me with a tailored response when I'm trying to think with the context of my whole project, how I could update my C++20 standard. So we're really excited to announce that this model picker is now available in Visual Studio and is constantly updated with new models so that you can select the model of your preference and sort of iterate with different model responses. And this includes OpenAI models and Claude models as well. So this is all really great to see. And so I'm curious, how would I get started with updating my C++ standard to C++20? And it can sort of provide me with dynamic suggestions for this that might differ from the GPT-4o model. And it's really good. We recommend playing around with different models, seeing what works well for you, and seeing what kind of results you get for that. And so it's sort of searching through my relevant context again, and it's telling me that I would need to sort of modify my cmakelist.txt file. I might need to set my set CXX properties macro to reflect the new standard and rebuild my project. And it also would tell me I would need to test that, but it also saying that there might be these other potential compatibility issues that I should be aware of, which is super helpful, especially working with C++, where you can commonly have third-party libraries. And so making sure that every single thing associated with my build configuration would be compatible with this update, including my compiler. And in this case, Visual Studio 2022 has really good C++20 support. So this all looks good and is super helpful for me to move forward with improving my code base for the future. Now that I've sort of implemented my functionality, I've cleaned it up for the future. I've learned a little bit about more functionality that I could improve for the C++ code. I'd like to finish off by testing and adding tests for my latest functionality. And so I can actually ask Copilot to generate tests, and it'll comply with my project structure. And so I'll ask Copilot/tests. And /test is a focus command that focuses on generating tests, and I can include my new function that I created. Oop, my bad. I'll just start a new thread, and then I can add this new function. And Copilot will provide me with a suggestion of how I can generate tests for this new command. And so it's looking at that reference and providing me with a targeted response for the tests. And so, it's able to provide me with these suggestions, and it even follows the doc test format, which is the testing format that this project uses, so that it really limits how much I would need to port code and adjust code that is provided by AI, because it's really compliant with my existing test structures. And so it really requires minimal porting over and just sort of the tweaks that I would want to make to it to make sure that it works. And so it ports over the function, and it even provides me with the different test cases and results for all of that. And so I can move over these tests and apply these tests for my C++ repo. And so that way my coworkers can run these tests with their full test suite and make sure that everything is working as we make updates to the existing code base, and make sure that every feature has its full test suite configured. So Copilot was really helpful with helping me get started with my first lines of code, understanding a little bit more about C++, navigating my code repository to get to my relevant task, and generating tests for the future. And so we'll go back over to the slides to summarize some of the things that we learned and upcoming updates or other updates for C++. To summarize, Copilot is deeply integrated into Visual Studio and VS Code to meet you where you are in your C++ coding workflow. Whether you're just getting started out with a code base or just trying to learn a new coding problem, Copilot can help provide you with dynamic code base information at several different integration points to provide you with relevant information to help get you oriented and understand your code. We saw in the demo today how Copilot is integrated into the quick info dialog to help you with describing any C++ symbols that might be lacking documentation, and how chat can invoke dynamic context based on keywords to help search the relevant context and functions to provide you with suggestions without you needing to always manually scope that context. We didn't get to see this today, but Copilot is also integrated into Visual Studio's feature search to enable you to utilize it to find and locate any relevant C++ tooling based on natural language within the IDE. So, for example, there's so much C++ tooling within Visual Studio, you can describe in natural language what you're looking for, and it can help you find, for example, the CMake configurations that you may be looking for. Copilot is also integrated into several areas in the Visual Studio debugger to supercharge your debugging process as well. We weren't able to cover this in today's demo, but you can look out for that familiar Copilot icon in your error list and light bulb, and Copilot will leverage semantically relevant context to provide you with an explanation and fix for your C++ errors. And so that way it can sort of help you with understanding your errors and resolving them. Copilot is also integrated into your conditional breakpoints to provide you with suggestions on conditions to break on. And so you can review those and see if those are relevant to your condition, as well as in multi-threaded debugging. It can help with providing you with AI-powered summaries of your threads. And so you can have that leveraged and tightly integrated into your parallel stacks window. And so that you don't need, whenever you're doing things complicated like multi-threaded debugging, you can leverage these AI-powered summaries that have this relevant context and can provide you with thread-based summaries. Additionally, when you're looking to improve code readability for the future, you saw this today, but Copilot is integrated into your doc comments, so in this case, XML or Doxygen, to provide you with suggestions in line for how you can summarize or enter parameters for that specific function. Another area where it's integrated in is the familiar rename dialog, where it can automatically generate suggestions for new renames for a particular symbol. And so you can focus on sort of reviewing these and seeing if any of these are a more descriptive or better fit for any variables, and sort of help you with that brainstorming or replacing step. So in addition to being super well integrated into Visual Studio and VS Code, we have also been working on making Copilot the most extensible Copilot yet, so that you can make Copilot work for you, your needs, and your preferences. And so, as you saw today, Copilot Chat now supports 2 different modes based on what your intentions are. Copilot Chat is that general purpose conversational interface that can help you understand programming concepts, or is integrated into Visual Studio to ask any natural language questions about code, and can also help you with generating code in that chat pane so you can review these code snippets. Copilot Edits is a more focused pane for multi-file editing and refactoring. And so you can ask it questions for like sweeping changes, and it can use that speculative decoding endpoint to provide you with suggestions in your files. And so you can review that line by line, integrate it into your editor, view those previews, and you can also roll back any edits that you don't want to keep. You can learn more at aka.ms/Copilot edits for Visual Studio or VS Code, and aka.ms/Copilot edits VS for Visual Studio. We also saw in today's demo, if you would like to cater Copilot to your AI development preferences, there's now a model picker available in the Visual Studio Copilot chat that allows you to select from multiple different models beyond the GPT-4o base model. And so we're constantly keeping up with the different models that are coming in through as AI is an ever-evolving landscape. So we have some of the GPT models as well as some of the Claude models, and you can learn more about the available models and some example workflows where they are advantageous at aka.ms/copilot models. You can also feed chat custom instructions, which is markdown-based custom context for chat to take into consideration, whether that be personal coding preferences, structure, suggestions, or any sort of additional context about your C++ code that you'd want it to take into consideration. To help you understand an end-to-end workflow where custom instructions are super beneficial, we actually leveraged OpenCV to generate a dog detector app using Copilot. And we were able to see how custom instructions were able to help us tailor our workflows and streamline our Copilot suggestions to be super applicable. So if you want to gather some learnings from that and learn more about how we did that so that you can learn more about custom instructions for yourself, you can check out aka.ms/cmake custom instructions. This project used CMake, VC Package, and OpenCV. Additionally, if you have any sensitive content or files that you don't want Copilot to ever have access to, Copilot now allows for IT level configurability to exclude sensitive files within your organization. There is support available for both Git and non-Git based repos, and this is across Visual Studio and VS Code. So if you'd like to learn more about configuring, please check out ak.ms/exclude_content. So what do you think? Try out Copilot and let us know your experiences. It is now available with a completely free plan with simple in-product migration and no credit card required. You can learn more about joining Copilot Free using ak.ms/copilot-free-vs for Visual Studio and ak.ms/copilot-free VSC for VS Code. And so we covered a lot of updates for C++ Copilot today, so let's summarize. Copilot has evolved a lot in the last year to incorporate smarter, more relevant context for C++ developers to have increased C++ project awareness and context. Copilot is now even more deeply integrated into Visual Studio and VS Code as IDEs to provide you with AI-powered assistance at any point in your dev loop, so you don't need to adjust your workflows and you can leverage AI within your comfortable tooling. Additionally, new extensibility points are available to allow you to make Copilot work for you and your needs, including several different models to pick from across both Visual Studio and VS Code, custom instructions that you can use to cater your chat workflows, or if you want to exclude any sensitive content via content exclusion. So I'd like to thank you all for attending my talk. We're constantly working to evolve Copilot's capabilities for C++, so stay tuned for updates in the space. You can follow our team, the C++ team, at Visual C on X and me at Sina_Akinja. You can also reach out to us via email for any feedback. We'd love to hear it at visualcpp@microsoft.com. Thank you all.